Hey everyone, it's Sarah, your market maven. I am here to do my second video recording. Now, full disclaimer on this episode, this is a lot different for me. I had to essentially figure it out on my own. My first episode, the part one of the Life of a Market Maven, first video episode, was done by a producer who was fantastic. Highly recommend Trent with Red Trucks. I got so much great feedback that I wanted to try another one on my own to see how it works and see if I can do it myself. So it is in my home office. You're not going to see all the fancy backgrounds and lighting, though I did buy a little ring light. Hopefully it looks okay. But yeah, I just wanted to give it a shot and see what we can do. So you listened to the first episode of The Life of a Market Maven, and maybe it was a little bit more tame than you thought it was going to be. Maybe it was a little bit more timid. But I definitely like to think of it as just getting the story started. And I know that there's a little bit more details and a little bit more of my expected snarky self to be involved. So naturally, when you write something down or you say something, you make a post, anytime you jot something down, you're like, man, I should have said this. I should have said that. There was a moment where I could have really just dropped that mic bomb, but it doesn't happen all the time. So this episode is essentially that. It's wanting to add some more to the stew, because that's really what this is at this point. It's not tea with our pinkies raised and our fancy clothes on. It's literally a boiling cauldron of stress, anxiety, and honestly mistreatment by the city for what should just be a really great community event. So in that first episode, that number that I dropped was very much a mic drop moment. It was a shock to a lot of people that didn't, know how much I had spent on running the Lake Stevens Farmers Market. But now that I've had a few days to run the numbers and kind of get the totals, I have those final financials for you. So in the last 6 market seasons, that's starting the Lake Stevens Farmers Market in 2020, averaging about 12 to 13 weeks plus 1, maybe 2 special events. We did a harvest and holiday market our first year, but we've since only pretty much done the harvest market. My business has paid the city of Lake Stevens $88,500. So that's not nearly the $100,000 that I mentioned in previous posts. I did say up to, but it is a shit ton of money for a city to make on a farmer's market, especially given that I or any organization I have worked with has never paid that kind of money to a city or administration to host a farmer's market. I have done the Mill Creek Market, I have done the Stanwood Farmers Market, and I have of course done the Snohomish Farmers Market for the last 11 years, in which case Snohomish charges us a $500 deposit, which we get back at the end of the year, assuming there's no damages done to any of the grounds. Even if there had been a little bit of damage to the grounds, we generally can work it out or we can fix it or whatever. But $88,500 is what the city of Lake Stevens has been paid. Now, I'm not saying that's all profit. And for full transparency, the city did pay for some of the initial market expenses when I was getting going. They paid for those dollar for dollar, not some sort of payment for me and my services. But for example, they wanted us to be a WSFMA market, which is Washington State Farmers Market Association. Those membership dues are fairly expensive, and we've also got to have liability insurance, marketing funds, as well as some advertising costs. I essentially paid for those, submitted receipts, and then was reimbursed dollar for dollar. What they didn't handle was my time, the education that I have and continued to participate in conferences and those types of things to better myself and better the market for our community. They didn't cover market equipment like folders, market signage, etc. I did borrow a table and 2 chairs each week, but I really don't think that equates to this type of invoicing. They didn't handle social media marketing. They didn't handle vendor recruitment. They didn't handle time at the market, which market days are usually a 12 to 16 hour day. All of that is me. They didn't do graphic design. What the city covered was a public works employee, which they were fantastic, deploying closure signs for the roads where applicable. We didn't even have Festival Street until 2023 market season, so that's 4 years in. And then management of the park on market days. I was told from the city that they had to put public works employees on overtime shifts in order to work the Lake Stevens Farmers Market since it took place after hours. But it seems to me that a public park as busy as North Cove Park is in Lake Stevens deserves a dedicated employee to manage it, whether there's a market there or not. Anybody that has been to the North Cove Park on a summer day knows it's a circus. It's a circus anyways. So then we add in a market and it's a little bit of organized chaos. I will say that my experience with the people attending the park in Lake Stevens, a lot of teenagers, not always behaving at their best. And I think that alone is a need for either a community service officer or police presence or just more management of the park. You've got multiple different restroom facilities, you have trash cans. All of those things are going to be used on a regular basis at a city park. And so pushing the expense off to the market as though it is some sort of huge influx of people, it's really not. Do we have people coming to the market and also using the park? Yes. Do we have people coming to the park and also visiting the market? Yes. Unless we went through and did a case-by-case basis, how are we to know that the traffic is solely because of the market? We want to hope that it is, but I don't think that trash services for a public park should be passed on to somebody that's renting it for one day a week. Those trash could be full by the time we even get there. So while we appreciate the public works employee, having to pay for overtime, which the city estimated was $6,000 to $8,000 per season, seems excessive. The city also provided me with the use of the mill, which is the building that was built on North Cove Park. I touched on that in my last episode. This building is often referred to as an eyesore in the downtown area. It was initially drafted as a community gathering place, but I know that a lot of people do not like the mill. It blocks the view of the lake from the little shopping center that's there. It seems kind of like a monstrosity to some people. I think it matches a little bit of a more modern vibe, which is great, but it is a hot button item. So when talking about the use of the mill, the city was adamant that I use the building because they wanted to use it essentially as free advertising for them to rent it out. I think it's a fun, interesting building. But now, as I've heard this year, the building costs for use have been priced out of any local nonprofit or community group's ability to be able to budget for that. So the restrictions on doing so, on using that building, are also quite steep. I mean, there is a huge contract, and I realize that we all have to take care of our assets. But when it's initially built as somewhere to be a community gathering place, somewhere for nonprofits to use, and somewhere for city council to host meetings, which they still do, but that's not at any cost to the city. It's interesting to hear at a recent town hall meeting that the city plans to build yet another community center on the west side of the lake, when right now the mill is not rented out frequently, despite what things might say, or despite what the town hall might say. Once again, due to costs. I've seen something very similar happen in Snohomish with the Carnegie. It was refurbished, it was rebuilt-ish, I guess you could say, with the intent of having the community be able to use it. There are so few venues on this side of I-5 that, we need spaces to be able to hold smaller meetings, not weddings, not huge festivals and events, but smaller meetings. Some of us are in little networking groups. Some of us are in big networking groups. We need a place to gather. I've heard from several nonprofits that they can't ever utilize that space due to cost. So why do we need another center? And why do we need to try and keep justifying the cost when it's not actually being used as it was intended? Want to hear some more mic drop worthy numbers? The city is currently appealing a Washington Supreme Court ruling favoring the sewer district. Now, if you know, you know, but I'm not going to get into a lot of the details. The long story short is that the legal dispute has now spanned 5 years and cost the city and the sewer district over $1 million in combined legal fees. So that's both of them. But the appeal process is likely going to cost the city another $50,000. The city of Lake Stevens is also in a predicted budget deficit of $2.9 million for 2025, with a similar number being reported for 2024. If current spending continues, the city could deplete its entirety of the reserves by 2028. Put a pin in this for later because we're going to talk a few more numbers. I touched on construction in my previous episode. Yes, the project that went 15 weeks past due cut down most of the remaining trees in downtown Lake Stevens area and still didn't solve any of the major traffic issues, including speeding, parking, and connected walking paths. When pushed on this, the city did relent and offer up an end time of 3 p.m. That never happened that I have record of. Now, I was not there each week, but I have a trusted staff person who would provide me a report at the end of each market day. And to our knowledge, to my knowledge and her reporting, that never happened. A 3 p.m. end time never happened. What I do have is emails and text records of our vendors being ill-treated, of being sick from the fumes of pavement and asphalt being laid down, of having headaches or having product damage from the constant jackhammering and the concrete dust. I have accounts of vendors being harassed and yelled at and sworn at. I have customers in community groups complaining about how they were so mistreated when they're just trying to cross the road. Now, I understand that a construction job is hard and you have to keep it safe, but swearing at people has nothing to do with safety. And continuing to work past an agreed upon time for the sake of the market would really have been awesome, but it just never happened. I have my staff, like I said, letting me know that not once did construction end at that time to support the market. But hey, at our harvest market a couple weeks ago, there was finally no construction. Yay us. But it was cloudy, it was cold. And honestly, the damage had already been done. It's not the time in October to make up for the absolute chaos and lack of contractual obligations that ended up happening over the course of this summer. When pushed on this, the city let me know that the construction was not their specific contract project. So it's not like it was city workers doing the work. It was contracted out to a construction agency. Now, I understand that they can only control so much. However, the irony comes from the fact that when the week for Aquafest came around, which is typically the end of July, they finally had a carnival back. So that's awesome. Awesome for this group. They finally had that back in place, but see any Lake Stevens community posts for the dramatic coverage of that whole thing. But somehow, some way, the city was able to have all construction equipment removed from the area, construction work halted, and it was stopped for 5 days in order to accommodate Aquafest, the long-standing tradition of Aquafest. Now, the market's only been around for 6 years. I get that. However, it seems as though if we want longevity in our events, we might actually support them all fairly and equally. The market is also something that happens every single week. Aquafest is something that happens for 4 to 5 days every year, and both are important. But when you look at what actually brings people to town over and over and over and boosts economy in the area, I would say the market has a bit of an upper hand on this. That's not to say that we need to compare the events. I know I just did. But I just think that it's a little bit damning when I'm continuously told all year that there's nothing they can do, and yet we have all construction halted, all equipment moved so that we can accommodate this festival. The only difference that I can see in these two events is that several city council members are on the Aquafest board, and the majority of the big city players are often seen at the event, either on their boats for the big boat parade, or in the past, drinking themselves silly at the beer gardens, which was a whole other controversy. But somehow we're able to support this event by removing and halting construction, but cannot keep up our contractual obligations for a farmer's market, a contract that was already signed. More on Aquafest. One of my vendors was curious about how much the city supports Aquafest beyond what is actually visible to the public eye. He submitted a public records request only to find out that the city donates over $40,000 in work and services to Aquafest each year. $40,000 each year. You heard that right. $40,000 plus, that's the low number, in police time, public works time, city staff time, rentals, equipment, traffic control, all of those things. All of those things are covered. Aquafest may be a nonprofit and a long-standing tradition, but it seems a bit off from the "we need to break even on events" spiel that I was given early on when trying to negotiate and pushing for less of my hard-earned money as a small business going towards city fees. So the city not only financially supported Aquafest, but also halted an already behind schedule construction project to ensure that Aquafest was not affected. I hope that it makes sense why I would be so frustrated by this. My last thing on Aquafest, historically, the Lake Stevens Farmers Market has taken the week of Aquafest off to be a good partner, to be a good neighbor, and ensuring they had ample time for their own setup in the same park as we're occupying on Wednesdays. This had generally taken place around the last week of July. Aquafest is that longstanding tradition, like I said earlier. It was a good time for us to take a break, give our vendors a break, and just a break for the market as well. Sometimes that saying, absence makes the heart grow fonder, that tends to work around midpoint of the season. And it's just chaos trying to coordinate both. Each year we've done this break, skipping that week for the market, and Aquafest has never set up any equipment or staging on that week. Now, that's not to say that they're in the wrong for that. They organized well and they didn't need the Wednesday, so that's fine, no big deal. So this year, given that we didn't even know if Aquafest was going to happen, community events need volunteers, not apathy, folks. It was built into my contract in January that I would offer the market for the full 13 consecutive weeks. Especially since this was likely going to be my last year running it, we wanted to make sure we gave it the good old college try, and we went every single week and we gave as much opportunity for the community to support it as possible. Well, lo and behold, in March, when Aquafest started getting word that a carnival might return, which is great for them, the market was going to need to adjust our schedule and cancel the market that week. Mind you, I already had a signed contract as well as vendor applications and vendor recruitment out and happening. I was already given the go-ahead to move forward, but here we are reneging on a contract in order to acquiesce to Aquafest. Not only that, but the date of Aquafest was going to be July 11th, so not even 6 weeks into market season. Not a good time to take a break. You can refer to some of my other podcast episodes referring to how difficult it is to shift a moving boat, aka market season, location, all that kind of stuff once it's set into motion. Naturally, y'all know me, I pushed back and let the city know that this was not fair to amend an already agreed upon contract for something that still wasn't finalized. They still didn't have a finalized contract for Aquafest, and yet I'm being told that I need to adjust mine and take a day off, a week off, 6 weeks into market season. Now, I know I just talked about taking a break and how good it is, but that's a good thing for midway points into the season, not almost right after it started and right before a big holiday weekend or right after a holiday weekend. Either way, it's not a good look. The response from the city was that I needed to provide at least 3 different layouts for that Wednesday market in order to conform to the unknown footprint and load-in of the carnival for Aquafest. I need to provide if I want to have a market. Okay, I can see some of the point of that. However, it seems like maybe we could have had Aquafest just involved in that conversation to start. But sure, I'll provide a couple of different layouts. This meant meeting with the city yet again. We met a few times to talk about these layouts, and then in May, that's right, I said May, just weeks before we're set to open the 6th season of the Lake Stevens Farmers Market, we were finally able to sit down with the Aquafest board and go over a plan. Now, I mentioned that the city council member earlier, in this case, he was actually a great advocate. I mentioned that city council is heavily involved in Aquafest or likes attending, all that kind of stuff. Our city council contact that serves on the Aquafest board is amazing. He's always been really awesome. He's always been great to work with. We have lots of conversations about vendor layout and stuff like that. So he's been great. When he jumped on this meeting, he was actually a great advocate, explaining that he didn't feel that there was a need to adjust, and he thought we could all work together like we had in the past few years. So it turns out that all of this confusion, all of this extra work, all of this frustration was all stemming from the city itself, not from Aquafest being upset that we were going to still host a market. It wasn't anything to do with that. And likewise, I even made a few comments very early on when I was working on those plans and layouts for alternative, ideas for that particular week, that some of the things the city was telling me, we need to leave XYZ open for loading and carnival equipment. I'm sitting there telling them, based on the map, based on what I know and what I see every single week from different sizes of trucks trying to get through, no carnival equipment is going to be able to utilize the street that we utilize for loading in and loading out. They won't make the turns because they're sharp turns, and things longer than like a 30-foot truck or trailer is not going to work without driving over landscaping, those types of things. Nobody listened to me, but in this meeting, I simply said, I told you so. I told you this wouldn't work, because that's what we came to the conclusion of, is that none of the carnival equipment on trailers and things like that was going to fit. They had a whole stage area for where they moved all of that construction equipment. So sure, they had plenty of room. So why would we need to move the market or adjust the layout or any of those types of things? And lastly, they were going to use Main Street and just simply block traffic in order to back things up into the loading area, which is highly unsafe and probably not legal unless you have a traffic control supervisor there. I digress a little bit on how much frustration went into all of these different meetings and all of the stress of trying to figure out if we were even going to have to do this, if we were going to have to adjust the footprint, and even to the point where the market may be canceled just a few days beforehand. I don't think anybody understands the logistics that go into having to fix and amend that, to have to cancel from these vendors, taking away their opportunity to probably get in somewhere else at another market if they just wanted to go try another market for a week and give it a go. This is just icing on the cake of the amount of frustration. All of this extra work from the city. Mind you, in the meantime, I'm trying to keep my vendors abreast of a possible cancellation, a possible layout change, as well as plan for additional staffing that day, just in case. And as type A as I am, I'm sure you can imagine how difficult it was to not be able to provide clear-cut answers. Ultimately, the market went off without a hitch. I went down there to be extra staffing that wasn't needed. We ran with our kids' vendor day that day anyways. Ultimately, the carnival folks that were there to set up were some of our best customers that week, and they took breaks from loading in and out with equipment to come over and grab food. They supported our market more than most of the high-level city staff did all summer, or ever for that matter. So yes, this is just a little bit more to add to the stew that is the steaming cauldron of bullshit that I dealt with this summer. Adding to my coffee with the mayor meetings only stemmed from going when he had open dialogue scheduled at Starbucks, because he wouldn't actually respond to my emails that I had been sending since early spring when I found out the construction was going on, was going to be delayed. But I also just wanted to talk to him about other market things and see how the city could better support the market. Something to note here is that previously he was very quick to answer my emails. Always answered them. Generally, it was me reaching out, but oftentimes we would have a really great dialogue. But speaking of quick to respond, let's talk about the infamous Facebook post. Do you remember when you were in high school learning about graphs and statistics, and you could make something or some set of data bend or lean towards your findings in a way that you wanted to present? Now, we all have that capability. This podcast is the very thing that I'm talking about. I can sit here and talk because I'm not being interrupted. I'm not having a dialogue with somebody else. I am able to present my full story right here, right now. Statistically speaking, I can also pull up a chart and put data in that really backs up my case. Well, that's what I consider the mayor's Facebook post that he did from his own personal Facebook page. Like I brought up in the first episode of this Life of a Market Maven, this was in response to a post that a friend of mine and an equally affronted citizen of Lake Stevens that's previously tried to help grow food for people in the community gardens. That was her post. It wasn't my post. I didn't go on blast in the Lake Stevens community page or anything like that, but she did. And she had information that I had given her to warrant that type of frustration, the death of the market, the death by fees, all of those different types of things. She didn't ask me before she posted it, and it's fine. I really didn't care, because what we need is more people on our side when it comes to these big community events. But the mayor presented a convincing argument that the city had paid for, or more importantly, that the taxpayers have subsidized the market and the cost that the city reimbursed for it to happen. He painted a picture that was damning to me and left out a lot of context. But either way, the city that pays $5,500 in reimbursement to get the market going still has to answer for the leftover $10,000, $12,000, or $15,000 that they've essentially made on the market, doesn't it? Because that's how the math plays out. It should also, in the same explanation, account for the $40,000+ that it subsidizes for Aquafest. No? Maybe? I feel like it should. So let's talk about the mayor a little bit more. A different friend of mine wanted to share my story, mostly my initial podcast episode on the Lake Stevens Moms group. As a fellow woman in business, she was pretty shocked that this is how I had been treated, especially after 5 great years. The moment that I spoke up was the moment that I started to be treated differently. The moment that I advocated for the city making less money from me is the moment that all of this seemed to shut down. No less than a few hours after she made this initial post, granted, this is supposed to be a mom's group, so primarily female, the mayor directly reached out to her, DMing her directly from his own personal Facebook page yet again. They're not friends on Facebook, and despite having some of the same circles overlapping, it was pretty clear that his question about her concerns for the farmers market were more to say, I see you and your post on a private women's-only group that he should have no access to. It was as though he was saying, I have eyes everywhere, which just goes par for the course with the city of Lake Stevens. Having had the experience with my husband running for office, this very much tracks with the city of Lake Stevens. You start to speak up, you start to say things on the Lake Stevens community page, you start to get targeted. This is a scary place to be because social media is a cluster, I'm not going to lie. But why is the mayor in all of these groups, or why does he have eyes in all of these groups so that he can see what's being said? I also want to know what's being said about the farmers market, Snohomish Farmers Market, me in general. But does he not have a better use of his time? Surely taxpayers would think that he does. The same taxpayers that he's trying to claim are subsidizing the farmers market. I don't think anybody's subsidizing the farmers market except me. Well, his controversial actions on the Lake Stevens community page, using his own personal Facebook page, have landed the city and staff in a public disclosure records request for any and all records that have to do with the farmers market. Personal, professional, you name it. And guess who's also included? This one right here, me. So even though my contract is over, I am going to have to spend hours of my time digging through things, both professional and personal, that may deal with the market and providing them in a nice little package for the city of Lake Stevens to be able to do their work. Again, is this a great use of city time, of city resources, simply because it's become obvious to the general public that shady things are happening? Why are our elected officials posting on Facebook about city business using their personal accounts? The mayor was not the only one. Several council members were on there posting and trying to defend as well. But some stick to the back of the meeting rooms and offhand conversations. Like one incumbent who previously supported the farmers market so long as it was doing well and making him look good, which is pretty much par for the course. He seems to think that my arm flailing and my poor attitude are all some of the shenanigans that I'm up to and some sort of heist to get my husband reelected onto city council. That literally could not be further from the truth. Meanwhile, Joe, said husband, wouldn't entertain that again for $1 million. We were so burned by that last experience. Like I said, being doxxed, having threats to our family, having accusations made that my husband wanted safe injection sites for the city of Lake Stevens. The same council person that I'm talking about here actually came up to my husband after the candidate forum and shook his hand and said that he too had lost somebody to an overdose and that he fully believed in what he was saying. But did he ever back that up in a place that would be recorded or documented? No. It was a simple handshake and then back to now we're enemies, even though they weren't even running against each other. So yes, city council and even some folks that I would have called friends and advocates have seemingly chosen sides, but they don't know how to keep their mouths a bit more tight-lipped when in mixed company. Several folks from the Lake Stevens Rotary, the Lake Stevens Chamber, and the like have let me know that I am definitely a hot topic right now. Me and my complaining, even though I'm not even a nonprofit, so therefore I am supposed to pay more. I didn't realize that only nonprofits were afforded fair and equitable treatment or allowed to make a living when it comes to pouring their heart and soul into something special for the community that drives people into our town, that helps provide food access, all of those different types of things. So that's a bit more of the drama surrounding the market. A thing that is supposed to be a community gathering space to help support small local businesses right here in our own community, to create some sense of unbiased unity in a world that seems to be a dumpster fire at every single turn, all while dealing with other market drama the last couple of years, the corruption in Snohomish, being let go in Stanwood, and the very notion that a woman standing up for what she believes in to be fair and just being called unhinged and needing to be dealt with. Oh yes, that's a direct quote. Add into this all of the little things. Being blamed for a business struggling. Hey, buzz in, Lake Stevens, I'm looking for you. It's not our fault that your restaurant does not serve the greater part of our community and what they want. Being blamed for people parking at the boat launch or illegally when in fact all they have to do to remedy the issue is actually tow cars like the signs say that they will. Vendors having their items stolen, half-naked kids running around in swimsuits all over through the summer and inside and outside of vendor tents and buildings, teens drinking fifths of alcohol in the park and asking why the hell I have any say over it. Not to mention the hundreds of daily bitchings and moanings from customers about why this market sucks, why it doesn't have precisely what they want or what they need. All of that happens in addition to the drama that has been taking place with the Lake Stevens City and City Council and the mayor. So when friends ask me what's next, I have no delusions of grandeur to think that the battle is over. Not with a public disclosure request open right now and a city staff member that never takes my reporting for accurate and continues to nickel and dime me with threats and nonsense. Being blamed for the missing keys from last weekend's harvest market that I never actually received, that were never actually put in the right drop box. I desperately want to keep the Lake Stevens Farmers Market going, and I am looking at alternatives. But damn y'all, I am tired. I am so tired of the drama. I'm so tired of the expectation, and I'm so tired of the own apathy in our communities, let alone everything that is coming from the bureaucracy side of it. Now that I've had taken 2 of these podcasts to even explain, and still I feel like there's more that I could say. I'm so tired of folks that continue to complain in the comments and yet take no action when given the opportunity. I'm tired of the commentary running around this town and others with unfettered proof and simple hearsay, and people taking it as though it is the Bible and it is law. I'm so tired of the same goddamn people being in power in these towns and doing nothing for their constituents, of taking money from developers and then in the same breath touting themselves for how well they're running an organization like our city of Lake Stevens. I'm so tired of them doing whatever it takes to support something when it makes them look good, or another photo-worthy moment to tack on their wall, and then 2 seconds later damning somebody because they've deigned to speak out against mistreatment. So I might take a long nap. I might finally decide to become a politician at this rate. Why not? I'm pissing off plenty of people, so I feel like I've got 50% in the bag. I know I'm going to need a lot of sage to get the ick off from the last couple of years of experience. And I know that what I said in the part 1 of The Life of a Market Maven still tracks. Change doesn't happen in the comment section. It's built by the people who show up, rain or shine, and dig in for the work. Thanks for listening.